Joining us today are two former National Party chairs, Ed Gillespie and Terry McAuliffe. Ed is a former chairman of the Republican National Committee and former counselor to President George W. Bush. He's one of the country's top communication strategists with a long record of success in business, in politics, in government, and a long trusted staple of the Republican Party. He's witty and a candid speaker who combines personal experiences at the highest level of government with intimate knowledge of government and behind the scenes in Washington. Terry McAuliffe is former chairman of the Democratic National Committee, former chairman of the Hillary Clinton for President campaign. And when the history of modern politics in America is written, Terry McAuliffe will be remembered as both the engine and the fuel that powered the Democratic Party machine into the 21st century. He's a lifelong entrepreneur, strategist, presidential confidant, party chairman. He's played an incalculable part in making the electoral map bluer and has been called the most successful political fundraiser of all time. Won't you join with me as we welcome Ed Gillespie and Terry McAuliffe.
All right, guys. Thank you, John.
Thank you, man. Thanks, Terry. Good. This is great. This is just great. We'll let you get your water. I shared a phone conversation with these gentlemen a week ago, and as I say, just can't wait to get started. So let's just do it. Ed, what's happening?
Well, it is great to be with you to talk a little bit about national politics in this very important presidential election year. National politics is different, as has been noted here, from the realm in which you operate. Much more practical and results-oriented in the cities, and obviously, as you mentioned, finding common ground and building bridges and rejecting heated partisan rhetoric. But I promise you, we won't have any of that here this morning. We'll talk a little bit about this election year, which is critical. And if you saw the front page of the Post today, I do think the president continues to be facing challenges as he seeks re-election. An approval rating of 45%, losing in a head-to-head matchup. But the election's a long ways off. 6 months from now, things could be different. Just like 6 months ago, things were much different. And the fact is, we've got a very contentious primary on our side. I know from how painful it is for me to watch, how enjoyable it must be for Terry to watch. But that's the nature of these things, and as Terry knows very well, 4 years ago, that was the nature on the Democratic side, a very contentious primary that got heated at times, but the fact is that resulted in a nominee who was stronger and came out of the process a stronger general election candidate. I believe that's what's going to happen here. I think that this contentious primary is a good thing. I do find myself sometimes thinking that it may be too much of a good thing, but I think we'll probably wrap this up in May on the Republican side, at which point we'll have plenty of time, June, July, August, September, October. It'll seem like forever, I promise you, by the time we get to the general election, for our nominee to make the case against President Obama's re-election. And I would say the odds are, pretty even in that regard. When you look at the historic pattern of a president seeking to be reelected, pretty favorable toward that in that circumstance. At the same time, when you look at the unemployment rate and correlations, since FDR, when unemployment has been above 7%, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush all lost reelection bids with unemployment above 7%. Ronald Reagan was reelected with unemployment above 7%. I think it was 7.2, but it had come down a full 1.5 in the previous 12 months, and the right direction, wrong track was very much in his favor. If you remember that campaign in 1984, the campaign was based on Morning in America, a very optimistic, positive message about right direction. I doubt that's going to be the environment for President Obama in November. I was happy to see over 200,000 jobs created last month, 250,000 jobs the month before that. I like to see Americans going back to work. At the same time, what you're seeing is a lot of people who have been disaffected and had left the labor force coming back into the labor force, which is why the rate didn't drop. And there are between 3 to 5 million Americans who have left the labor force since President Obama took office. And when they begin to see jobs starting to be created, they're going to come back in. I think the unemployment rate, hard-pressed to see it being below 8% let alone 7% in November. So tough road to hoe for the president, I think. And then I'll just conclude by saying I do think there's a good chance Republicans not only win the White House, but win the Senate as well and hold on to the House. In my view, there are three possible scenarios at the end of this election. One is status quo. President's reelected, Republicans control the House, Democrats control the Senate. The second is a complete Republican takeover. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And the third is a split decision, where the president gets reelected, Republicans hold the House, and Republicans win the Senate. It's an exciting time if you're interested in politics, because I'd put even odds on just about any one of those scenarios, and it'll be an exciting 9 months while we try to shake that out. 8 months for the next 8 months. It'll be fun to watch. So thanks for letting me be with you.
Thank you for being here. Terry, from your perspective, is he right?
Of course.
Yeah.
This is the part
that's why we got two major political parties in the country. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me here today, and good morning, everybody. Oh, come on, this is not it's not a Republican fundraiser. Let's have some noise here. Good morning. Let's show some life, some excitement. Barack Obama. I'm going to give you my honest opinion today. Not that when Ed and I were chairman of our two national parties, we weren't always the most honest with you on national television. You know, it's hard to go on Meet the Press the Sunday before an election, and Tim Russert says, Mr. Chairman, you're going to win this, you're going to win this. Oh, no, Tim, we're going to get our ass kicked. Stay home. You know, it's not good for voter turnout, you know, if you don't think you're going to win. So this is not Meet the Press. I'm no longer chairman of the National Party, so I'll give you my honest opinion. Listen, I like to tell Democrats who have watched this absolute circus of the debates that have been going on with the Republicans who have been giddy, don't be giddy. First of all, I will tell you that in 2008, and as you know, I chaired Hillary's campaign. We ran against President Obama. We all came together on June 7th. That was an interesting election, but when we finished that up in the general election, you got to remember that President Bush had the highest disapproval rate of any president in the history of our country, 72%. We had a war in Iraq, we had a war in Afghanistan, the economy was going off the cliff, world economic meltdown, nothing was going right. And yet, we only won by 52%. So I remind everybody, be cautious. It's going to be a tight election. I will tell you one statistic, though. When a president has taken over from the other party and run for re-election, only once in 100 years has that president not won re-election. That was Jimmy Carter in 1980. It is hard to beat an incumbent president. We have most of the advantages today. We have no primary opponent. We've already done millions of contacts with voters. We've raised a tremendous amount of money. And on the other hand, you have the Republican side, which has gone through all these debates, which I think is, I don't know why they allowed so many debates. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. The conservatives have taken over the Republican Party. They have pushed all of the candidates over. I mean, I couldn't make any of this stuff up. I mean, you had Rick Perry. He was going to be, remember when Rick got in the race and, you know, the first debate, you come to Texas and you break the law, we will kill you. And like the whole crowd starts screaming, yes, kill them all! I mean,
we've got some folks from Texas here.
Yeah, so. I know. Let me tell you this, I'm not going to Texas. But they have a field day with me. You know, it has been one extreme. I mean, how high can we build the wall and how much electricity? It has been one pushing people away. It has been anti-women. It's been anti-Hispanic. It has been, they're going to come out of this, and this is the most dangerous thing for the Republicans right now. And I assume it's going to be Mitt Romney. I think Newt Gingrich has to win 70+%, and I think Rick Santorum has to get 65. Not going to happen. It's going to be Romney, but it's going to take a while. And unlike our primary, everyone says, well, Hillary and Barack went all the way to the end. And I was in the middle of that. We did. We went right to the beginning of June. But we didn't have this visceral attack on each other. Remember the one debate where President Obama said to Hillary, oh, you're likable enough, and that was like, whoa, I can't believe he said that. You know, you've got Newt call, you had Santorum over the weekend having to apologize. He's called Mitt a liar. I mean, it's not been helpful. No offense, Ed. It hasn't been helpful to you guys. And it has really hurt Romney and the Republicans with independents. And at the end of the day, in 2008, 28% of the voters were independents. The Gallup poll last week said that now 40% of Americans now call themselves not a Democrat or Republican, but they view themselves as independent. They are such an important voting bloc, and I'm sure there's many folks in this audience who were independent. After you hear me, you'll probably be over on my side. But coming in here, you were in that 40%. Today, Mitt Romney, with independents, has a 53% unfavorable rating, 32% favorable. Now, if you're in politics, it is very hard to change that unfavorable rating. So they're going to finish up this election down in Tampa, which, great choice, Ed, picking Tampa in the middle of hurricane season, but, you know, good luck. Another brilliant move by the Republicans, but I guess you didn't have much choice, did you?
Phoenix is a little hot in August.
Well, at least they're not going to blow all the TV trucks away. I mean, unbelievable. I couldn't write this script for you if I wanted to. So you guys will have a good time in Tampa. Okay. So we're going to finish up. They're going to go to Tampa, and then we head in the general election. And then forget the polls today. Really don't matter until they have a nominee. It's going to be a tight race. President Obama is going to run on the economy. He's going to say, I inherited the worst economy since the Depression, which is true. But, you know, we need to create a lot more jobs. He's had the third straight month of 200,000 plus jobs. We've had 26 straight months of job growth. We've created 4 million private sector jobs since he's been president, albeit long way to go. But I would much rather be making that argument than whatever Mitt Romney's going to make on his side about, you know, he and his wife driving around the Cadillacs and making $10,000 bets. And, oh, he really related to the people. He went to NASCAR. I got to love this. He goes to NASCAR. So they throw the cameras in front of him and says, yeah, I love NASCAR. I know a bunch of owners. Folks, I could not make this up. But we will. And then there's Newt. I mean, the party of family values, you got to be kidding me. I mean, the children from the first marriage come out to defend. I mean, this is hard to do, to defend the third wife against the second. I mean.
Pro-marriage. Pro-marriage.
I mean. So, all right, let me finish up because, you know, I just don't know where I can go from here. But. My prediction, final prediction, I believe President Obama wins. And remember, I will tell you, we're only going to be fighting over 10 states. Just remember this. It's going to be 10. And I advise any of you in those 10 states, buy a radio or television channel if you could. But we're going to be, it's Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, New Hampshire, Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Colorado, Nevada. There are probably some more, but those are basically be the 10 baskets of states. It's all going to come down to that. And where are those independents going to be? President Obama is going to be talking job growth. I've continued. Here's where we were. Here's where we're going. And I think in the House and the Senate, I don't disagree much with that. I would say today that we probably pick up 10 to 15 in the House. We need 25 to capture control. And in the Senate, Ed had a bad week last week. As you know, Olympia Snowe, good, moderate Republican who could get along, said, I can't take it anymore, I'm leaving. And it is the 13th most Democratic state in the union. Should be a pickup for us. Bob Kerrey announced he's going to run it in Nebraska. So I would say that in the Senate, they pick up maybe 2 of 3. They need 4. So I think, yeah, slight control by the Democrats in the Senate, closer in the House of Representatives, Barack Obama, and you'll all be my guests at the inauguration in come 2013. Thank you. Go Obama!
10-state election?
It'll come down to 10 states, I think. I might add a couple. I might add New Mexico. I think you mentioned Florida. You say Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think these target states are going to, probably 10 is about right.
Ed, help me, and I assume you wouldn't disagree with Terry's numbers about how many more independent voters there are now than there used to be. How do you score that with the increasing partisanship that we see?
Well, I think it contributes to it. The fact is there is a polarization, and particularly in Washington, D.C. You know, Terry mentioned Olympia Snowe, and there's a National Journal magazine rates the most liberal to the most conservative, members of Congress. And in the Senate, for the first time, I think this year, the Olympia Snowe, who is the most liberal senator, was still to the right of the most conservative Democratic senator. So Joe Manchin's the most conservative Democrat. There used to be an overlap. There used to be, about 15 people that were kind of where you had Republicans to the left of some Democrats, Democrats to the right of some Republicans. That's not the case anymore. So, there's a real polarization. And it kind of forces people to choose, and some people just don't want to choose. They're not comfortable and would rather just be independent and vote for the person, not the party. I understand that. At the end of the day, though, even though they're self-identified as independents, the fact is President Obama is going to start with about 46% of the electorate. The Republican nominee is going to start with about 46% of the electorate. And the real swing vote, even, those, if you're self-identified independents, you're probably going to fall one way or the other when it's all over. About 8% are the ones in the middle. So I'd say, 8% in 10 states is really where the presidential election is decided at the end of the day.
Agreed?
Yeah, which is where most of the states are now breaking down. It's going to be who can attract those moderates. They want to see things done. The problem is, as I've said in the thing, is that it's pushed the Republican Party to the right. It's not where the independents are in this country. It's not where the swing voters are. I think you saw a huge turnout in 2010, obviously with the Tea Party. I think they probably hit their nadir, and that has gone down significantly. And I think what most people want to see, which is what you folks have to deal with every day, they want results. They want action. I mean, I agree with Mayor Nutter and a lot of things he said. We're not moving the country in the right direction on education and on transportation. I do a lot of renewable energy. I've started 30 different businesses. I'm building electric cars today. What I worry about is all this fighting we have in our country today. We're allowing countries like China and Brazil, Argentina, India to move ahead of us, and we're bogged down in this partisan stuff about nothing, and we're not moving our country forward. We're not creating jobs, and we're letting other nations move ahead of
us. Would you agree that Citizens United and the new pot of money that's flowing into these campaigns is just making things even more and more partisan?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, when I was party chairman, I opposed McCain-Feingold when I was at the RNC, and I said it'll be bad for the process. The fact is that, the RNC and the DNC play actually an attenuating role in politics. And so when I was, party chairman, I understood Olympia Snowe in Maine has different voters than would, a Texas congressman. And, you tend to even those things out. The fact is McCain-Feingold, by taking the national parties out of the state play, they've essentially federalized them. And they put more power in the hands of outside groups, which don't have the same kind of transparency requirements, don't have the same kind of responsibilities. It has contributed, and it's also, by the way, it's one of the reasons that I think our primary on the Republican side, this is the first primary where we've really operated in the realm of the super PACs. And so, even candidates who don't have a lot of money, one person can stroke a check to one of these outside groups, a super PAC, and keep these candidates alive for a much longer period of time. And they tend to be inherently more negative in their messaging. So yeah, I do agree with that. That's one of the reasons I oppose McCain-Feingold. That said, it's the law of the land, and those are the rules by which people are playing now, and you got to play by them. And it's unlikely that you're going to see much change because every time politicians in Washington try to sell the public on campaign finance reform, they always say, well, it's going to make the system better. And pretty much every time it doesn't. So I'm not sure the American people are going to be all excited about a new round of campaign finance reform from people in Washington.
So you agree the Tea Party's peaked in its influence?
I think it had a major impact in 2010. I think, Tea Party voters are behaviorally Republican. I think in a presidential election year where turnout is probably 30% higher than it would be in a midterm election, their impact is not as great. It gets diminished a little bit in a presidential year cycle as opposed to a midterm cycle. But I think they still have a strong influence, and I'm glad they're in the process.
Terry, imagine, if you will, that, and this will be difficult for you, that you're chairman of the RNC right now.
It's harder for me to imagine.
Well, and
that would be interesting.
Yeah, after you've stopped laughing at that prospect.
Yeah.
Tell me what your strategy would be.
Yeah. Well, first, I think they've made us, when I was chairman of the National Party, First of all, I brought all my candidates into my office at the national headquarters. I think we had 11 or 12 running in '04. I said, here's folks, first thing I'm going to do, I'm taking over all the debates. I'm going to run all of them in the national party. I'm going to allow you to have 5. Because what happens is every interest group goes to the candidates and said, well, I got Ed Gillespie coming to mine, you need to come. And then they all feel compelled, they all have to go, and you end up with all of these, and you just don't want that process. I said, I'm going to take them over, I'm going to run 5, they're all going to come to you and say, I can't do it, Terry won't let me do it. Few smart things I've done in my life, that may be one of them. But it's a little late for that, we've already had, I mean, I actually love watching these debates. Well,
I mean, obviously you do.
Mean, right, I mean, this is better than comedy. I turn the office on and I turn on Eddie's debates. If I were, listen, I think Romney, and as I say, you know, we have 8 months is a long time to go in this business. He's got to make a bold move, I think, on his VP pick. I've said this for a long time. I think the biggest danger for the Republican Party over the next 20, 30, 40 years, the fastest growing population in America is the Hispanic community, fastest growing by far. The continued alienation of the Hispanic community, and it's only been fostered through these debates, is very detrimental long-term to winning the Electoral College. So if I'm Romney, you know, listen, I'm not in the business of picking it. I think they have this Susan Martinez, who I don't know, but people say she's very bright, female governor in New Mexico. He's got to put somebody on that ticket. He doesn't need to go conservative. They already got all that covered. They need to go out to show that they can go out, that he can relate to the average, you know, middle class, because middle class is feeling like they've been pushed out of the Republican Party. You know, I would say he's got to, I think his 2 big choices, I guess, would be Rob Portman in Ohio or maybe a Susan Martinez or Marco Rubio from Florida. But you've got to have a vice presidential pick that shakes up the ticket, makes it exciting. Not like not with Sarah Palin, like what he did and I said at the time, if you go back and look at my TV appearance, I said, this is the craziest thing. You know, Hillary, the famous speech, 18 million cracks, remember, in the glass ceiling. They thought, well, let's be cute. We'll put a woman on the ticket, and all those women who voted for Hillary will come running over. It had the absolute opposite effect. They felt offended, and it was the worst thing they could have done. So not a Palin type, but I think something like a Susan Martinez or a Marco Rubio, I think, would be something that could really turbocharge their ticket.
Let's do the same. You're chairman of DNC, and as much as this hurts you to think about.
He's always wanted to be.
Yeah, always wanted.
Always wanted to sit at my old desk.
Where do you go from here?
Well, I think you're seeing where they're going from here. I think that this is going to be a very negative campaign. The negativity will not end at the end of the Republican Party primary process. I think if you look at the DNC, where they're headed, the rhetoric coming out of there, they'll try to disqualify the Republican nominee immediately. They'll be sitting on a load of money. The Republican nominee will be broke, trying to raise money for the general election, and I think they're going to unload on him in that period, and they'll say unqualified to be president. And
you were chairman of the DNC. Don't say this negatively. Go ahead.
We'll be excited.
Don't call it rhetoric. It's your message.
We're going to tear into him.
Yeah, no, baby. There you go.
We talked about the new technology. You realize all these comments will be abstracted and on Facebook.
Oh, we're used to it by now. We're used to it by now.
Trust me, we've done it. Yep.
Yeah, the sound bites will be there before you leave the stage.
Right.
So we're all or for the most part, we're all city and town officials, and you've heard our agenda, and I think we speak with one voice in some of the action items that we hope are part of the campaign, or at least a part of the next Congress and next administration. What's your best advice, Ed, for us as local elected officials for having an impact on the 2012 elections?
Well, I think local elected officials are for good reason, widely respected by their constituents and their voters. They're leaders. They're not seen as crassly partisan. I mean, people have party labels and they run on them, but I think the more local, the less the partisan divide, the higher up in the federalism process, the more pronounced the partisan divide. So, you're leaders in the community. I know you're engaged politically, and I think that you also command respect from the candidates, and they'll listen. And the members of Congress that you're going to see today are going to listen. I've worked on the Hill for 13 years. When our city council members and county commissioners and mayors came in, we listened. And I worked for conservative members of Congress, but they wanted to, hear what do you need at the local community. Sometimes we had differing views on what we could support, but people will listen to you. And I think that's important. I think that this is an area where the impact on quality of life that you all have is direct and immediate, which the roads we drive on, the schools our children go to, our home values, our communities, our shops and our home values. So I think just being engaged in the process like you are today and being engaged in the political process regardless of party, I know a lot of independents here as well, I think that's a significant contribution to make.
Terry, it's hard to run on quality of life though, isn't it?
No. Listen, I think your biggest asset, remember these candidates need you, not vice versa. I mean, because you're in the communities, you're the ones who can get the votes out. I think the more that you talk about the issues as they relate to you, because people got to understand at home, you're where the rubber meets the road is, the wastewater treatment plants and all that. I'm not sure enough of the constituents truly understand about what unfunded mandates mean and what preemption mean and all these other issues and what they may do with the federal government, how it affects their everyday lives. You got to let people understand clearly that when they do something here, it's their fault and how it affects you at the local level. And I think you got to, once you get it down to the issues and what it matters, I happen to be a big believer. We got to spend money on transportation. It creates jobs right away. But we have thousands of bridges and roads in our nation today that are literally decrepit and some of them could fall. We don't need another bridge collapse like we had a few years ago. Education, this is what I worry about. I agree with what's been said here today. I'm all the earlier, if you can get a child in education, and you get them learning by the time they're 3 or 4 years old and how that will change their life going forward, the pre-K, these are the issues I think that really matter, and I think you should force those elected officials to take action on it. Be tough on it. Just don't support a candidate because they're Democrat or Republican. Get out there on the issues that matter. And if you disagree, I disagree with Democrats on issues, disagree a lot with Republicans on issues, but you know what? It is what it is. I got my right to my opinion.
And one of the ways we are trying to communicate with our constituents and with our elected officials falls in that broad category as social media.
Yeah.
What do you see? Who's listening to what in terms of social media? What's more effective? What's most effective?
Well, it's having a dramatic impact, and I think largely a positive impact. Although I do think the social media does contribute to this polarization that we talked about earlier as well. But it's an area where I have a concern from a partisan perspective. I believe that there's a widening gap between the left and the right, Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to utilizing social media. The left has been much more ready to adapt to it, to utilize it, to deploy it, and Republicans/conservatives have been slower to embrace it and to understand it and to maximize it, and I think it makes a significant difference. Area I know a lot of Ohioans here following the issue 2 debate and the vote there. Interesting statistics someone pointed out to me that the the pro-conservative side, the Chamber of Commerce side on the issue 2, the repeal of the collective bargaining law, they had about a little under 5,000 Facebook fans on their site. The pro-repeal side on issue 2, which was actually the no vote, I guess, but the labor union side had more than 70,000. There was like a 13-to-1 gap in terms of the social media that was being deployed, right? And it paid off for you. I think that's a good indicator. But that said, it's an empowering tool, and it's a great way to communicate with constituents. And from a conservative perspective, it's a great way to kind of get around NBC News and the Washington Post and the New York Times, which tend to be, not as friendly to conservatives in my view as they are to liberals. So we should be more incentivized to maximize it, but we're not right now. I'm hoping that gap will close.
Thoughts, Terry?
I clearly think everybody in this room would agree. I think President Obama took the whole social media to a level no one's ever seen before. The constant communication that goes on today. I know at his headquarters, they ring a bell. Every day they raise $1 million online and they hit the bell. I think they've rung the bell every single day but one. It's a communication to reach out and raise money, and B, a spectacular communication tool. I love it. Listen, the more people that we can engage in the democratic process, we're fighting all over the world today for democracy. And the more people that we can get excited, listen, we traditionally, historically have had very low turnout, especially in off-presidential years. We just had some elections in Virginia, abysmally low if it's a non-presidential year. So I think all of this social media gets people engaged on the issues is actually a good thing. It gets people engaged in the political process. I will say one editorial comment, I hate to see what's going on today with these votes in these state legislatures where it's making it more difficult for people to vote. I just find it absolutely crazy that we should be limiting people's right and access to vote. No, my mother, Millie McAuliffe, is 90 years old. She is not going to get a government ID so that she can vote. We should not make it difficult for people to vote. In Virginia, we just passed this legislation. The governor signed it. In the subcommittee where the bill originated, they asked the author, give me one instance of voter fraud. He said, I don't have one. Then why are we doing the bill? Oh, it's the right thing to do. Let's make it easy for people to vote, not harder. We're fighting all over the world to get democracy. We've got to make sure we have it here in the United States of America.
You want to respond?
Sure. Look, obviously, I agree we need to make it easy for people to vote, but it's as wrong to deny someone the vote it is to have someone else's vote canceled out by a wrongful vote, by somebody voting twice or somebody voting illegally. And these laws enjoy broad public support because there is a sense that there is voter fraud, and there are instances of it, Terry. They're pretty well documented. And the fact is, if you can, there's a balance that needs to be struck. No one should be denied easy access to their legitimate right to vote. At the same time, no one's legitimate vote should be canceled out by an illegitimate one.
Well, let's switch gears for a second. We don't have much time left, but you heard me
just
tell
remember, these illegal immigrants aren't running up to polling booths and are like, I've got to vote today.
I wasn't talking about
well, whatever. I mean, it's so infinitesimal. I think the damage you do on the other side to scare people away, I think we should err on the side of bringing people into the voting process. But.
Let's switch gears.
Yeah.
You heard me tell about Clarence and Lloyd earlier, sitting around the pot-bellied stove. Well, it's years from now, and you're sitting in a home for aging politicians.
Don't you go
somewhere.
there.
and you happen to end up in the same, and by that time they've got a wet bar and everything, so you're sitting around, and after a few drinks, Ed, you kick back and say, boy, one of the wildest memories I had when I was RNC chairman is...
Well, for me, it was probably the home stretch of the 2004 election, and talk about voters and the importance of them. I went around and rallied volunteers, and I remember being in Hendersonville, Nevada, standing on the back of a pickup truck with about 1,000 volunteers who were going to go fan out and knock on doors and turn out voters. And the electricity, I mean, it was a very close contest. We knew it was going to come down to the wire. It was very exciting. And to me, that was that trip to 10 target states, going around, talking to volunteers, phone banks, thanking people for helping the president in his re-election bid. That was a lot of fun. I'm not sure it's the wildest, but it was it's my most compelling memory.
Terry, same question. You probably have wilder memories.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No question. And try to get one out of it would be hard. I actually did write a book called What a Party, number 5 in the New York Times bestseller list, number 1 in Washington Wall Street Journal. You can read about my life. It was very historic. Growing up, the nuns at St. Anne's never thought I would read a book, let alone write a book. So, but I've had 30 years. I've done all this politics for free. I don't take any pay. I mean, I enjoy doing it. It's my way of sort of giving back. I've had a lot of great experience, been friends with the Clintons for a long time, and they're a lot of fun. Love them dearly. Most expensive friends I've ever had. But I think one of the greatest experiences, I grew up in Syracuse, started my first business when I was 14, wanted to go to college, was going to have to pay for it myself, and President Clinton asked me to be chairman of his inaugural, and I think probably the most exciting experience I've ever had was chairman of the inaugural in 1997. Your car, as the chairman, leads the presidents behind you in the motorcade down Pennsylvania Ave, millions of people on the street. I had my father from Syracuse, just a good old Joe from Syracuse, riding shotgun. He said, Terry, this is the greatest experience I've ever had in my life. And just to have my proud father up there in the shotgun leading the President of the United States was probably the single most exciting experience I've had.
must confess, I'm a little disappointed. When I asked for wild experiences, I thought we were going to go a completely different direction. but
too many cell phone cameras here for that. We'll talk later.
We've got 2 or 3 minutes left, and all of us come here to learn. And as you contemplated being before a couple thousand city officials from all across the United States, from the very conservative to the very liberal, what advice have you got for us as we approach Congress, as we approach the administration? Give me some advice.
Well, I think, it's been said here already this morning, but it's true. I mean, make the case for your principles and the policies that you're for. But do it like you always do in this environment, or generally do in this environment, which is, civil discourse, and do it with respect. Terry and I, we couldn't agree on a stop clock what time it is, but, we're pretty good friends. We get along. My teenage daughter calls him my frenemy, and I have people say to me, geez, how can you go on TV with Terry McAuliffe, my conservative friends? And I always say, I have a love-hate relationship with Terry McAuliffe. I love the guy, and I hate myself for it. So I think, kind of that spirit, it's a little old school, but it's where we need to be. I obviously, I think it's been clear, I don't agree with President Obama. I respect President Obama. He's the President of the United States. He deserves that respect. But we can make a case against his policies, which we'll do throughout. And so I guess the only thing I would say is, I think lead by example here as you operate and interface with, at the federal level where that's not always the case. There's an opportunity here to demonstrate that it can be done and remind people that it ought to be done.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, sort of my theory on life. First of all, you should always be positive. You always ought to have fun. I think politics has become way too personal. It's really unfortunate. I was chairman of the National Party 4 years. I was on TV every day. I never once personally attacked George Bush. I didn't think it was right. Disagreed with him on issues, fought like a dog on the issues, which you're entitled to do. But, just get out of this whole negativity, this personal fighting back and forth. It's just not helpful to the process. Compromise is not a bad word. I mean, I do it in business every day. I don't get everything I want in life. I wish I did. I don't. I got to cut deals. I got to negotiate. But this idea that if you're not with me 100%, we're not going to do this. Poor John Boehner's trying to get this transportation bill out. He can't get out of his own house. We ought to be able to get a transportation bill out. The only thing I would also ask, and Ed and I agree on this, I think one of the most destructive things that has happened to politics, and I talk about this when I was chairman of the National Party, this partisan redistricting we have in our country, I think is the root of most of the evil. When you draw lines and 95 or 99% of members of Congress win re-election again, you know what? They're in office forever. They don't have to be aggressive. They don't have to fight for the constituents anymore. They stay in office. They stay in too long. And I think we ought to have nonpartisan voting lines drawn. We ought to have competition. Competition, we should have it throughout politics. We all have it in business every single day. And members of Congress should have a competitive election every 2 years. When they don't, they lose where they're trying to go, and they're not actually fighting for you every single day. So I would hope when you go back to your communities to really push what I think, and I personally talk about this, is a nonpartisan. We've just gone through it, and a lot of the same members of Congress are coming back. We are the greatest nation in the world. And we got to always remember, we are number one, a lot of nations following us. Let us come together on the things that move this country forward. Because finally, I will tell you what I worry about, and I mentioned it earlier. We are in a global economy. We are competing against China today. Look at what Brazil's doing. We can't go from a nation where we buy our oil from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia to a nation where we're buying our solar panels and wind turbines from China and Brazil. We got to get in the future business, 21st century.
Stay with me here a little bit. Let's give a big NLC thanks to Ed Gillespie and Terry McAuliffe.
All right, Eddie. Good to buddy.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Very good job.
Great to see you, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. Go, Bubba!
Thank you. Thank you.
Have fun.
See you guys. Thank you.
We'll give each of these guys a head start because undoubtedly one of them's made you mad. I don't know which one it would be. But we do thank them for being with us this morning.